All right, my friends, Marantz just dropped the Cinema Series 8K AV receivers at CEDIA 2022. That's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Hey folks, I'm Gene Delasella with Audioholics. Now I'm supposed to be in Dallas right now covering the CEDIA 2022. Unfortunately, Florida got hit with the mother of all storms, giant Hurricane Ian. Luckily, it didn't hit me directly, so my family and I were safe, but I do feel very sorry for those in Fort Myers and in the surrounding areas that were devastated by this. So whatever you can do to help them out is awesome. But I'd like to cover these new Marantz Cinema Series receivers. We have a full report on the audioholics.com website. I will link it in the description below. I want to go over the details with you because there's some confusion with what the different models have. So I got into some of the details. I'm going to share my screen with you now, and we'll kind of go over this. So I really like the look of the new Marantz Cinema Series. This looks like their high-end components that they have now between their SACD players, their integrated amplifiers. It's a nice look. It really does look different than most of the boxed receivers that you see, the very generic boxes that you receive. So this is a nice touch. Now, they did go upscale a little bit in price. I know the COVID and supply chain issues and all that, as you've been seeing prices going up with electronics, so don't be sticker shocked by some of these prices, but I do want to go over the features with you. We did drop the flagship separates in the last video, as you can see here, the 16 channel separates. Watch that video. I'll link it up in the description. Masterpieces right here. I can't wait to review those. But for those that can't afford to go to that level or don't have the space for separates, you want to know what's going on with the AV receivers. I'll show you a back panel here of the Cinema 50. This is the second to the top of the line in the Cinema Series. And you can see a couple of cool features on this back panel. Number one, you've got 9 speaker outputs. Actually, you got 11, but you only have 9 internal amplifiers. But you got 4 independent subwoofer outputs. Now, we saw this with the new Denon receivers that were released. And we saw this with the separates from Marantz. This is awesome. The benefit of multi-sub, I've stated in so many videos, but to have now 4 independent subwoofer outputs for independent delay and level setting, and also in the future Dirac upgrade to be able to do that spatial audio correction. And we'll be doing a video on that as well. This is potentially game-changing stuff in room correction. And it's awesome to see at least 2 of the models of the Marantz receivers support it. A bunch of the Denon receivers support it, and of course the Marantz separates, the AV10 and AMP16 or AMP10. Just awesome stuff here. I want to basically go over the differences on these different models. You can see we have quotes from Marantz in here. You can read all this. I don't have to go over this stuff. I want to get into the nitty-gritty with you on the models here. So we start with the Cinema 60. The odd thing about this nomenclature with the Cinema Series is as you go lower in number, you go higher in the AVR. Not very intuitive at first, but I guess we just have to get used to it. So the Cinema 60 retails for $1,700. This is a direct replacement to the SR 5015. It's rated at 100 watts a channel with 2 channels driven. It has 7 internal power amplifiers, and it's got 7-channel preamp outputs on it, which is awesome in case you want to add external amplification. I've gone over this before with you guys. Marantz and Denon have really strong preamp outputs, really clean preamp outputs. They do 4 volts RMS unclipped, and some of these models have a preamp disconnect mode where you physically disconnect the amplifiers from the preamp, and that gives you even a purer signal. So there's no interference at all when you're cranking up the volume. It's not going to clip unused amplifiers. But the latest generation of Marantz receivers like the SR8015, even with the preamp mode not engaged, so the amplifiers were connected, I was still getting really good results. They put a buffer circuit in the latest generation of Marantz and Denon receivers. So rest assured, these are going to serve as really good dedicated preamps if you don't want to go and buy a dedicated preamp. You want to start with a receiver and then maybe move on from the amplification, but use the awesome processing power that these products offer you. That's a real, it's a way to save money instead of buying an expensive preamp, and you're also getting the solid reliability of Sound United Denon Marantz HDMI. The Cinema 60 has 3 of the HDMI outputs are 8K. I'm sorry, inputs are 8K, and 3 of them are 4K. So there's 6 total inputs. Then we go to the Model 40s and 50. The Model 40 is the flagship in the cinema line. It retails for $3,500. It replaces the SR6015. I'm sorry, the SR7015. And the Model 50 is $2,500, and it replaces the SR6015. So the interesting thing is between the Cinema 40 and the Cinema 50, there's a $1,000 difference in retail. Both of them have 11.4 channels of processing, so they both have the ability to support 11 speakers, even though they only have 9 internal amplifiers. So you would have to go and add a 2-channel amp. They both have 4 independent subwoofer outputs, and they both support Dirac. Now, the Cinema 40 has a little bit more of a bigger power supply and more power, rated at 125 watts, whereas the Cinema 50 is rated at 110 watts. You're probably wondering, why would you spend the extra $1,000 on going from a Cinema 50 to a Cinema 40? And I had similar concerns about that. I didn't understand at first, based on what I saw with the press releases, what are you really getting there, right? So I have a tabulated differences here from Marantz. I got this directly from their engineering, and I'm just going to go over this with you. So the Cinema 40 is designed and manufactured at their Japan Shirakawa factory. That's like their premier factory where they basically make all their flagship Denon and Marantz product. That's where the venerable 5805 was made, the SR8015, whereas the Cinema 50 and the other models are manufactured in their Vietnam. So just take that for what it is. If you want the more prestige of their high-end manufacturing, you're going to go with the Cinema 40. The Cinema 40 uses the higher grade audio components. They have the HDAM SA2. It's the improved version similar to what's on the SR8015. And you guys can check out my bench test results on the 8015. One of the best measuring receivers, Atmos receivers that I've tested so far. The Cinema 40 has a more powerful EI core transformer and audio capacitor and higher rated power. It's 125 watts a channel versus 110 watts with 2 channels driven. Now, all the Marantz receivers in the lineup give you that 70% guarantee. So they give you, with 5 channels driven, they'll give you 70% of the rated 2 channels driven. So in my testing, I come close to about 7 channels driven for the 70% rule. So it's a pretty conservative rating. So just to do some math for you guys, if you're looking at 125 watts and you want 70% of that, you're looking at about 90 watts. And then at the 110 watts, you're looking at about 77 watts for 5 channels driven, but more realistically, probably closer to 7 channels driven. So you're getting solid amplification in both of those models. The Cinema 40 utilizes monolithic amp construction, meaning each amplifier channel comes on its own PCB instead of one single amplifier PCB for all channels. This gives you better crosstalk performance. I've seen this in measurements, and they claim it also gives you better vibration performance. The Cinema 40 incorporates more acoustic treatments for audio tuning, copper screws on the back panels. So some of this is esoteric. I mean, some of this is build quality. Does it really quantify into something that's measurable? Who knows? It is nice to have something that's better built, of course. You just get you get an aluminum and large trapdoor on the Cinema 40, and you have the big display below it. The Cinema 40 has 3 source, 3 zone, 2 source, 2 zones for the Cinema 50. You got more triggers, and here's the interesting thing. So none of these receivers, except for the Cinema 40, support analog video connections or up conversion to HDMI. So if you guys are still sporting a Wii and you want to play Wii Bowling or Mario Kart or anything like that, you can't plug those into any of these receivers unless you have the Cinema 40. You've got, I think, 2 composite and 1 component input on the Cinema 40. So it is interesting. A lot of these manufacturers are getting rid of the legacy video connections. I understand why. This is an HDMI world now. So it just makes sense at this point that that's what you're going to see. And I want to go over the last one is the Cinema 70S. This is their slimline receiver, and it retails for $1,200. And it's a 7.2 channel, 50 watts a channel. It's got, I think it has, if I'm reading correctly, it has all 8K. I'm sorry, it has 3 8K inputs, and 3 of them are 4K. And that's the same with the Model 60 as well. So there's only 3 that support 8K. If you want all of your inputs to be 8K, you need the Model 40 or Model 50. And the Model 40, of course, has the composite and component video support and up conversion. So one thing I'd like to say, I guess, about the Cinema 70S, it's an interesting product if you want something, if you know you're not going to use the internal amplification, but you want to have a Atmos processor and you want to have Odyssey and you want to have, 7 channels of support. You can go and add this. It's got preamp outputs, and then you could go and add a 7-channel amp, and you basically have a cheap version of separates. Now, the only thing about the Cinema 70 and the Cinema 70S and the Cinema 60 is they're not going to support Dirac. The only ones that are going to support Dirac are the Cinema 50 and the Cinema 40, and incidentally, those have the 4 independent subwoofer outputs, whereas the Cinema 60 and the Cinema 70 have 2 subwoofer outputs, but they're in parallel. So they don't have independent delay or level control. So you're definitely getting much more advanced processing in the 40 and the 50 if that's the route you want to go. I want to give you another shot of just how these receivers look. They look exceptional. So that's about all I have for you on these products right now. I put up some links in Audio Advice if you want to pre-order one of these. We'll be bench testing probably one of these models in I would say sometime in the next couple of months. But the important thing is, since we missed CEDIA, I did talk to Sound United, and it looks like I'm going to be going out there to their facility sometime in November. And I'm going to be doing some interviews with them on these features, on what Dirac is going to be all about. Hopefully we could get someone from Dirac on our channel. I want to talk about this spatial Dirac. I want to talk about the advantages of what's coming with their room correction, because this is very exciting stuff. Well, guys, I hope you found this video useful. Please thumb it up. Please subscribe. Don't forget about our Patreon channel at patreon.com/audioholics. We appreciate your support. You get direct access to us if you want to suggest video topics or ask questions. And until next time, my friends, keep listening.